Do me a favor and teach me the difference between assume and presume.
So I think presuming something is a little bit weaker than assuming. So almost the same word, but to a lesser degree. So you might say presumably, and then something that is plausible. Assuming it would be like, I'm going to take that to be true. So
Okay.
if
So
I
they're
talk to a
related.
Christian, then I would say that presumably they don't agree with, the parts of the Bible that talk about like killing someone for being gay. Like presumably they don't believe that. I wouldn't assume that they don't believe it because I recognize there being a possibility, over 5% chance that they will think that you should do that.
I have a story that kind of speaks to what you were just talking about, Anthony, because when I was a kid, a teacher told me something that I believed for years. It was a science teacher. And I used to tell this to people. I'm embarrassed about it now because I only accepted it because a science educator told me about it. And I just accepted the claim. And the claim was that bumblebees are aerodynamically incapable of flight. And this is something that he was absolutely serious about, told the students that. And most of us just believed it without question. And it wasn't until much later that I realized aerodynamically incapable of flight would literally mean it's not flying, and yet they are flying.
Are they hopping? How are they locomoting? How are they getting around?
They're fucking flying. So the statement is just incorrect. It's contradicted by the evidence. But I didn't question the science teacher who knows science.
Exactly. Yeah. I had almost the same problem. It was a history teacher that said it, but it was like, I think 8th grade history teacher said that mosquitoes transmit STDs because basically if a mosquito bites me and I have AIDS and then it, goes and sucks your blood, then it's almost like that same thing on the mosquito is almost like us sharing a needle, and you can get AIDS through sharing a needle. And I remember one day it was when I was at the ACA. I just kind of like said it casually, like it was something that I knew. It was just a piece of information that I got from a teacher. I knew it to be true. I thought I knew anyway. I was like, this is no. And I said it, and a few people questioned me. I'm like, no, look it up. And everyone looked it up and immediately was like, no, like you cannot get STDs from being bit by a mosquito. Of course, there are viruses that you could get, but not STDs.
Malaria.
So I was like, okay. So I just assumed that was true because my teacher said it. And now I realize that wasn't a good idea. So
see, it's not only about teaching the students, though, to question, but it's about teaching the teachers to encourage the kids to question.
See, and then that's one of the things that confuses me, because I totally understand that we can't all have the same interest. Everybody can't be into what I'm into. But as somebody who's into epistemology, it's weird to me that it's not something that we learn in school. Like, I didn't even know about the word epistemology till I heard of Anthony doing street epistemology. That was my introduction.
That was the first time I probably heard it, but didn't really grasp it.
Through SE, yeah. And then, learned about epistemology itself, non-street epistemology, just the study of knowledge. But I realized, I was like, wait a minute, they give us all this information. They don't teach us, how do you justify a belief? What does it mean to know something? What does it mean to be justified in a belief? What does it take? What is a justification? What are some reliable methods to arrive at beliefs?
I wonder if this is a U.S. issue, though. Like in Norway, are they teaching epistemology in 6th grade? What's happening?
I don't know, but I could tell you this much. Kids graduating high school should know at least 20 logical fallacies. They should know what epistemology is. They should at least have some contemporary understanding of what epistemology is.
It's critical thinking that needs to be taught in high school. And
not just information. How do you interpret the information? Because you're going to get all kinds of information. You're going to get contradictory information. What we need to give kids is some way to discern fact from fiction. And we're not doing that. We're just giving them, here's the information.
These talks might be just the nudge people need to think about it and get them started on a journey of really seriously thinking about the quality of their reasons and the strength of their methodology or epistemology to say, like, am I fine with that?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was actually going to say, so I did one of the first times I did SE, actually, I was lucky enough to have an interlocutor who was just on the edge of, leaving religion. Wasn't someone who had thought about it a lot recently, but he just wasn't very convinced. He clearly hadn't thought about it a whole lot. And I remember he was intrigued because he saw me at the dog park, and I'm reading the Bible wearing a shirt that says "Talk Heathen" on it. And he's like, I got to talk to this guy. So he's, that was intriguing for sure. I talked to him. I do SE because I had just recently learned about your videos, Anthony. And this is a little bit before I started going to the ACA and all that. And I talked to this guy, and in 5 or 10 minutes, he was an atheist. He was like, holy fuck, dude, you're right about all of this shit. And then
I would be concerned about that.
Yeah, well, no, I ended up talking to him because the reason you're right to be concerned, but the thing about it is he was someone who was already on the edge of his belief. Because if you talk to someone who goes to church every week and has 100%,
I've been in it for 30 years, I've got all these facts, and then they change after 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, right? That's
but different. You could very well run into say like Shane just described. They're right. They just need that one little question to get them thinking, and that just. And I would say, so 2 things. One is that it was actually, I went to the ACA and I talked about that happening, and that led to me being asked if I wanted to be on Atheist Vanguard, which actually led to my career. So in a pretty direct sense, Anthony, you did motivate me to begin doing what I started doing. So earlier when you said, we'll motivate more people to keep doing this, I'm actually an example as well, just kind of like Dan is. But then in respect to that, I remember the night that I became an atheist. So I left my religion when I was 13, but I became an atheist at 17. Between then, if you asked me if I believed in God, I would have used the word creator because I felt like God had religious baggage to it. But I remember the question that made me become an atheist. It's pretty simple. Why do you believe that a God exists? And it was so weird to me that it's like, has no one asked me that?
It's the simplest question in the world.
I got asked that. And it was when I realized all of the ways that I tried to justify it. I'm like, I didn't know the word question begging, circular reasoning, or infinite regress, but I did have those concepts. And I was like, I don't have any reason to believe one exists. And I already was like, I'm not necessarily saying I know there isn't one, but I don't believe that there is one. And if I don't believe in a God, well, that's what I understand what atheism to be. So,
and I would suggest to anyone appealing to faith, if they were to answer that question, or if they were presented with that question, why do you believe in God? Faith doesn't work as an answer because faith is believing in God. So you're essentially just saying you believe because you believe. So
depends on how they define that word, though, Bryce.
It depends on how you define that word. But if you're using faith,
it depends on how they define the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you or they are using the word faith as a methodology, then at the very least, you ought to be prepared to explain the methodology. And that's the missing thing that I find. They're using it as though it's a methodology, but it doesn't appear to be one because they cannot outline the methods.
Yeah, but it's believing. Even people who practice SE, it's a lot harder than it sounds to apply it to your own beliefs, because some of the beliefs that we arrived at a time that we had a much weaker standard of evidence. So I remember it was like 5 or 6 weeks ago that I just kind of made a claim that I thought I knew, and somebody asked me how I knew that was true, and I realized I was like, I wondered when I was 16, I Googled it, and I believed like the first answer. So now that I have a higher standard of evidence, I have to re-examine my beliefs, and it's actually pretty difficult to re-examine your beliefs because, it's not like checking out the contents of a desk where you could actually open the desk and literally take everything out. When you want to think about the contents of your thinking, it's a lot harder to examine that. You can't actually pull every belief you have apart.
Final thoughts, Mr. Magnabosco. What is your hope? What is your dream? What is your goal? What do you want? What do you want from this?
I want people to respectfully challenge authority at every turn. I want it to become commonplace to ask questions and to have a desire to believe true things and not demonize people who change their minds. I want to make that accessible. I want to try to tamp down obscurantism and just talking in big words to confuse people and seem smarter than the other people. So improving communication and getting aligning the confidence that we place in our claims in coordination or tied to the reasons and methods that we have. I'm not asking for much. Like this is basic shit, but we need a cultural shift to make it normal. And that's what I'm pushing for with the nonprofit that we started and all the videos and doing these interviews and that type of thing. I want to get to the point where it's acceptable to say, I wonder how you concluded that that's true. And the person says, me too, actually, now that you're bringing it up, let's figure it out.
Right. And if
Go ahead, Shane.
the belief is in fact true, they could re-examine it and re-justify their belief in it. And then all you've done is strengthen their confidence in a belief that is true or justified. And I think that's very important too. One thing I want to do is I want to be able to provide, and one of the reasons I'm focusing more on epistemology than street epistemology, I want to be able to provide people who identify as skeptics with a sort of consistent, rational form of skepticism. There is such thing as radical skepticism, and I don't think people should be adhering to that because it makes a mockery out of rational, legitimate, consistent skepticism, such as people like myself have, or believe that we have, I should say. But that's why I'm more into epistemology than street epistemology. But they complement each other. So I would encourage everyone listening to go in depth on both of these things. Question not only your beliefs, how you arrive at your beliefs. This should include propositions that you believe that you know. Being wrong and not knowing it feels exactly like being right. So remember that. And my life philosophy is predicated on my belief that everybody's wrong about at least something, and I'm a person, therefore I must necessarily be wrong about a few things, and I want to figure out what those things are. So that's part of my journey. So every time I get corrected, my goal is better achieved. So that's my long-ending answer.
I love that statement that when you're wrong and you think that you're right, it feels exactly like being right. It really does.
Exactly.